Hey there, Mr. Ride Op. I want to ride this roller coaster, but I want to ride in row 4.
No, I need you to go to row 2. It's empty.
But I really want to go to row 4.
No. Do you see all the people behind you? I need a full train. Go to 2.
No, I want to go to 4. I paid good money to come to this park. I want to go to row 4.
See this badge? I'm royalty. Whatever I say, it goes.
Oh. What's up, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of the Screamin' Horseshoe Q. We are back. Dwayne, this is your show. Wait, I want to hear the catchphrase right away.
Right away. We have a great show for you today. But before we get started, go grab yourself a big pouch of Oreo cookies, pour a gallon of milk, and let's get ready to argue some great coaster manufacturers here on This Just In, and let's get going.
So, of course, tonight, like Dwayne said, we're going to talk about best manufacturers. We're, of course, joined by Danny Miller, unfortunately, and Jeff's here with us as well. So best manufacturer. Now, before we started the show, we picked 6 manufacturers to talk about, and we kind of felt that these 6 manufacturers were pretty much the only ones that were valid enough to talk about. So, of course, we have B&M, we have Intamin, we have RMC, we have GCI, we have Mac, and we have Vekoma/SNS. We kind of grouped those 2 together just because, they're kind of under the same ownership umbrella. Even though they're kind of being run as separate entities right now, what the hell? Throw them together, right? We can do whatever we want. It's our show. So we're going to go through each person, and they're going to talk a little bit about how they ranked these 6 manufacturers and have a little open roundtable discussion here, I think, right? Does that sound good to you guys?
Yep.
So who wants to start tonight?
Not me. Jeff, go ahead.
All right. Dwayne, Andy, and I think we're all about the same age, so I'm going to assume you guys can relate to this a little bit, but I feel like collecting things is part of hobbies. As a kid, you might have collected action figures, trading cards, comic books, whatever. But, all hobbies have like these.
No,
things,
Andy's
right?
room is no indication of that whatsoever.
I can see no large pile of stuffed animals. I know that Danny does not have a nickname based on his collections. But I always think of the roller coasters as like collecting experiences. So like, I always think of it like that. That's why I like the Thrilling 32 and Red Warrior Choice Awards, because I like, this kind of thing. So I'll kick it off with Intamin. So I gave Intamin the most points. It's the manufacturer that I went looking for the most when I was choosing new parks. Some of my favorite rides that don't often get into those awards, like Storm Runner, Cheetah Hunt. Even though it's not a big ride, it's still a really fun ride. Volcano, the Blast Coaster, kind of fell out, but before it got dismantled, but a very special ride, I thought. So I always think of those, and then there's always the major favorites like El Toro, like I-305. I know that you guys have strong feelings about like Millennium Force and Maverick, and those are like 2 of the rides that I want to go on the most. I gave the next amount of points to RMC because mostly because I look at that as a future company. It's a ride manufacturer that I've only been on a couple of them. I've enjoyed them all, and it's one that I want to collect more of. B&M, silky smooth, very comfortable, super re-rideable. lots of great coaster types, hypers, inverts, two of my favorite types. They got the next spot. S&S, I gave the nod for the fourth spot, mainly for the same reason as RMC, but, not as strong in my opinion, but S&S I feel like might become a player in the future, and that makes me excited to, think about the future. And then rounding out the last two, not coasters that I don't like, but, somebody's got to be towards the bottom, are GCI and Mac. So GCI I gave, 2 points to, and Mac I gave 1 point to.
Well, it's interesting the way that you phrase it, because I having been around roller coasters for the better part of my life, and having, I think, grown up with certain manufacturers, obviously that's going to heavily influence. And I've always said, when you ride coasters makes a big difference on how you feel about them. Like Danny likes to piss on Raptor all the time. But Raptor is an important roller coaster in the history of roller coasters. It still holds the attendance record. We thought it was going to be broken this year. Raptor still attendance record.
By any means necessary, Raptor will keep
even
the
if
record.
it means a coronavirus pandemic, Raptor going to get the job done. Raptor's still number one in attendance for Cedar Point. So I've always said that the order in which you ride things and the time of which when you ride things, like when I rode Raptor, not a whole lot of big coasters out there, so, comparatively speaking, if you ride these fantastic coasters and there's not a whole else out there, you're going to feel a different way about them. Whereas today, if you're going to ride coaster number one, there's a whole hell of a lot to choose from just right inside the borders of Cedar Point. You can find a couple of number ones, just walking in the one park. So maybe Raptor isn't going to be high on your list. Comparatively.
I know, thinking back when I was a kid, with what you just said, my favorite coaster for a long time was, I'm going to get it in the comments, Din. I know, it was Hercules. It was the biggest in the world at the time. I loved it. I know people have, mixed feelings on like how it aged, but
old hurt your knees.
Hurt your knees, right? But I also love Sky Rush, Thigh Crush. I think I like anti-heroes a little bit there, but
that's gonna bring.
That was definitely something that was like an early love, and I keep it high on my list, even though I haven't been on it in decades now, because of how I felt about it back then.
Yeah.
Well, and Andy, I think we should write down a note here that at some point the four of us need to do a worst manufacturer of all time, and I think Din might end up going in that discussion of 5 or 6 manufacturers. Could you picture us talking about Togo and Din and so you can think of some others there. For an hour, that would be maybe more fun than this discussion.
So I'll go through my list. So I had RMC with 6 points, Intamin with 5 points, B&M with 4, GCI with 3, Mac with 2, and Vekoma with 1. Some random thoughts here. Going off of what Jeff said, when I was searching out coasters, I was the same way. I was looking for Intamin coasters. And I don't know if what I found actually matched up to what I wanted to find. Knowing Millennium Force, knowing Maverick as the 2 Intamin coasters that I rode multiple times, and then going out into the world, finding other Intamin coasters like Fahrenheit was a bit of a letdown. Storm Runner was good as a ride. Obviously Sky Rush, I absolutely love Sky Rush. I think I'm one of the few people who still has Sky Rush in a top 5 anywhere on the planet.
I have it in my top 5.
Okay. So Danny, I know you're it's probably in your top 10, which includes 23 coasters.
Right.
But then like Cheetah Hunt was good, but wasn't like amazing. But then I think looking overseas and looking what Intamin could be, and seeing a lot of the stuff like Nefeskesen and Ice Speed and the Intamin Blitz coasters, just because they're not here doesn't mean that they can't do really amazing things. And I've always said, when Intamin does something really well, nobody can touch them. And maybe there's a caveat on that now with RMC. But when Intamin was building fine-tuned roller coasters like a Maverick, there's nothing that can top something like that. So that was my first thought. And then like RMC is kind of like this new kid on the block, right? Where most of the stuff that they built has been pretty damn good. And honestly, at this point, aren't there more RMC coasters in America than there are Intamin coasters?
Good ones.
Well, I think notably that's a thing that I'm going to get into eventually here.
Yeah, and it's like and I'm not an i305 fan either. So like that's also like for me that it kind of like set Intamin back a little bit. But RMC, I've been really impressed with things like Iron Rattler. I've been really impressed with Outlaw Run and Lightning Rod. And I think that's the other interesting thing is that RMC kind of does both. And Intamin has done both with the El Toros of the world that you can feel how you want about El Toro. That half of the screen over there has very different beliefs about El Toro. So you can believe what you want about El Toro, but like RMC, they've done Goliath, they've done Outlaw Run, they've done Lightning Rod. Like these are really good wood roller coasters. And on top of that, you have a good collection of good steel coasters. Steel Vengeance, the best coaster ever made. You have things like Iron Rattler. You have things like Wicked Cyclone, or not Wicked Cyclone. No, sorry, Twisted Cyclone. I don't want people to think that I like Wicked Cyclone all of a sudden.
No, we wouldn't want that, would we?
No, you do have clunkers like Storm Chaser and Wicked Cyclone out there, but I think RMC is really showing the great stuff that they can do. And then you got like B&M there too. B&M's been like the solid, if you want a solid roller coaster manufacturer, I think we're seeing that with Cedar Fair. If you want something solid, it's like you go with B&M. It's going to be a solid ride no matter what you get, unless it's a stand-up. Then you never know. GCI I've really loved. Their recent stuff, Prowler, Mystic Timbers. I like the smaller GCIs. I really dislike the bigger GCIs. I'm not a Gold Striker fan, not a Thunderhead fan. I like the smaller, compact, airtime filled GCIs versus the big, drawn out, boring GCIs that Danny likes.
See, and Andy says all that, not realizing that the height difference between all those rides you just mentioned is like 10 to 15 feet.
Well, shut up. No one cares. No one cares about your stupid facts, Danny Miller. And then Vekoma, I don't think Vekoma SNS has really made a mark yet. But Mack, I want to speak on them for a second. I think Mack has been by far the most disappointing coaster company. Danny, how many times did we sit on Uncut and talk about, man, we wish we could get Mack coasters here in America. And now that we have them with Copperhead Strike, a huge letdown in my book, a solid ride, but not world beating at all. It's barely in my top.
You're beating me to my punchline, Andy.
Well, whatever. And then Time Traveler, a good ride, but not up to that level. So I think I need to get out into the world and maybe go ride something like a DC Rivals to kind of see what Mack can really do. But overall, I've been really disappointed with Mack, and that's why it's down towards the bottom. So that's my ranking and my thought process.
All right, who's going next? Dwayne, do you want to go last, or do you want to go now?
I'll go last.
All right, you can go last. So I very, very quickly looked at my own personal rankings, and then I also considered sort of the what have you done for me lately type of feeling, and also quality versus quantity, right? Those are some of the things we have to talk about. So with number one, I went B&M. And I went B&M because, number one, ride's very reliable, very comfortable, very re-rideable in general. Every big park has at least a couple of B&Ms. And in general, there's not many B&Ms out there that are truly bad. There's some that you might think are boring here and there, but there's not really a B&M. That was coming. But I looked at my I very quickly looked at my top 50 steel rankings list, and 23 B&Ms appear in my top 50. And your Furies, and a lot of the rides that a lot of people have in their top 10, a lot of the hyper coasters, your Behemoths, your Diamondbacks, your Makos, rides like that. And then some more, I'm not going to say obscure, but some of those that people, I think, tend to maybe not talk about so much in terms of being really good rides, like a Thunderbird, a Superman Krypton coaster. Some of those rides that are really just, they're just standard roller coasters when you think about them in today's day and age, but they're really, really solid rides that everybody seems to generally like. So that's why I went with B&M number 1. Number 2, I went GCI because I'm being the wood coaster guy. That's sort of my job description here on this panel, I suppose. But
we
GCI,
say
I think,
you say wood coaster guy.
Right. But generally, GCI, I think if you were to pick out a B&M of the wood coaster industry, I think GCI is the closest to that in the sense that they build reliable rides. They don't go super extreme out of the box like what Andy was saying. They don't have anything that's super huge or does anything super crazy just yet. They've started to go a little bigger here and there, but generally you think about their rides, and I'm going to rattle off. I looked at my top 25 wood list, and there's 11 GCIs in there. So quite a number of them. So, but you think of rides like Gold Striker, which Andy's not a fan of, but think about the fact that they did retracking work on rides like Boulder Dash and Legend that even though Andy doesn't like anymore, most other people do. But think about a ride like Ghost Rider that people forget.
Finally, because I thought you were making a case for GCI being the worst there for a second.
No. No. But no, I'm going to mention some rides that you like now. But, Ghost Rider, a CCI ride at one time, now a GCI coaster, and without a doubt a top 10 wood coaster, maybe a top 5 even in a lot of people's books. And then think about some of the smaller rides that Andy was talking about. Your Prowlers, your White Lightnings. How about Renegade? How about Joris and the Drac? A ride that I rode last year. Only 70 feet tall or so. One of their smallest rides.
And Danny, still, where is that one located? Joris and the Drac? What continent?
Oh, that would be in jolly old Europe there.
Oh, yes. That's where I forgot.
Yeah, but it's interesting. Actually, in the Netherlands specifically, you can find probably one of the biggest deltas in terms of size in GCI, because you've got Troy, which is one of the biggest ones they've ever built, and then you've got Joris and the Drac, which is one of the smallest ones. And Wodan Timber Coaster, the biggest one they've built. Up until they built some of the ones in China. But then how about Mystic Timbers? Another ride, the newer ones. And that gets me to my other point, is GCI is continuing to build these really good rides year after year after year, just like B&M is. We haven't seen the fall off like we have with Intamin. Now, maybe Intamin's making a comeback here, but we've had like a 7 or 8 year.
I'll tell you what, Intamin's comeback looks like it's going to be pretty strong with whatever that Velociraptor coaster is going to be.
It should be. It should be, right? And if you don't account for that 5 or 6 year gap that we haven't had anything in the States really from Intamin, I think maybe Intamin's higher than number 4, because they're only number 4 on my list. Number 3 is RMC. And the only reason RMC, I was debating between GCI and RMC for number 2 and number 3. And I picked GCI, one, because I'm the idiot / wood coaster guy. And I saw a high, generally speaking, I really like the GCIs. There's not many GCIs except maybe for like a Wildcat at Hershey Park, which was their very first ride ever, that I don't really like. Even my very last ride on Gwazi before it shut down was a half decent ride.
I don't understand how, because my last ride on Gwazi,
I said half decent.
I thought it was missing wheels. That's how bad it was. I thought it had missing wheels on it.
Well, I thought it was too, but I still got some decent airtime out of the deal. No, I don't know if that was just from going over the hills or just being bounced out of my seat the entire time. It was probably the latter. But then I looked at my top 50 steel again, and I saw 8 RMCs in there. So you've got rides like Steel Vengeance, Untamed, Twisted Timbers, Iron Rattler, New Texas Giant, Joker. And when you start getting into some of those others, Wicked Cyclone, to name another ride that Andy doesn't like here, seeing a trend here. They have a handful of rides that are really out of this world amazing, world-class, top-of-the-line rides, and then they have a bunch that are really, really good, and then they've got, a couple clunkers here. But the big thing for me that RMC is working against it is just sort of the lack of quantity still. And they're getting there. But then you consider the rides like Outlaw Run, Lightning Rod, Goliath, RMC, I think, has the biggest diversity of any of these companies in general, I think. You could maybe make an argument for Mach there, but they don't do the wood coaster. The fact that RMC regularly dabbles in wood and steel, I think is significant. Which is another reason why I put them ahead of Intamin. Intamin at number 4, yes, they can do wood coasters, but they don't regularly do them. They've done a handful here and there. They did American Eagle. I think they contracted on a few others. And then they didn't do anything until they did the couple of plug-and-plays. And I looked at my top 50 for Intamin here, and I only found 7 of them, which is actually less than I would have expected to find. And they're actually pretty top heavy, because I've got like Maverick, Expedition G-Force, Terran, Millennium Force, and then I ran into like a big wall of B&Ms and RMCs. And then I ran into a couple of Intamins later on down the line. So when you really, we've always talked about B&M versus Intamin, but when you actually look at your rankings, in general, I think you'll find maybe 4, 5, 6 Intamins right there in the top cluster of maybe 10 to 15 rides, and then you probably won't see any for a while. And then you get down into your rides like the Supermans at Six Flags America and Darien Lake, and you get to a lot of these other rides. But generally, there's kind of a gap between Intamin's, the cream of the crop, and then their next tier, whereas I think B&M...
And I'm almost positive that's the argument we made way back when we first did this show on like episode like 6 or 7 of Uncut. I'm pretty sure we said, when Intamin does something well, it's amazing. But you're going to, like, when you look at the rankings, you're going to have that big gap.
Yeah, and I just brought my list up again here. I mean, I've got right in the top tier, you've got Maverick, Expedition G-Force, Terran, Intimidator 305 is one I missed, Superman at Six Flags New England, which is another ride Andy doesn't like again. But then, you sort of see a gap here, and I see a lot of B&Ms, I see RMCs, I see some Mach rides in here. The next Intamin that I get down to is Goliath at Walibi Holland down at number 40. So, you get into those smaller hypercoasters, but generally speaking, there was a cluster of really world-class rides, and then there's a little bit of a gap there. Number 5, I went with Mach. And as Andy, you alluded to this here, we've been talking for maybe the better part. We started doing this YouTube stuff in the fall of 2014 as we were approaching 2015 because we thought 2015 was going to be one of the best years for roller coasters in modern history. We had rides like Fury 325, Twisted Colossus, Wicked Cyclone, Thunderbird, all opening up, all these really big rides that people were excited for. And we started doing it then. And back then, we were waiting for Mach rides to make an appearance in the U.S. Really, all we had was Manta at SeaWorld at San Diego. In 2012, we had a couple of smaller rides. We had some Wild Mouse coasters. We had very little in the United States in terms of Mach coasters. It was all generally overseas. And now, having been to Europe a couple of times and riding a lot of those Mach rides, they're good rides. The problem is very few of them can compare to your above average B&Ms, your above average Intamins. I think certainly the best two in the States that come to mind are Copperhead Strike and Time Traveler, not necessarily in that order. But those are nice rides. They're good rides, top 30, top 40 range maybe for me. but they're not really breaking into anyone's top 10 list. And even when you go over to Europe and you ride the big mock rides that people talk about, like Blue Fire being the good example, Blue Fire is a really fun ride. It's a great ride. I don't think it's better than Time Traveler or Copperhead Strike. That's not necessarily a knock on it. It is what it is. It's a very fun ride. It's not overly forceful. It's got some good speed. It's got a decent launch. I mean, the launches aren't overly intense. I think DC Rivals is the mock ride that most interests me, because they've recently started to go bigger. In the behind the scenes tour we had of the Blue Fire service area, one of the things that the folks from mock said was, if we would have been building a ride like Silver Star today in 2019, we would have done it ourselves. But back in the early 2000s, they hadn't gone that high yet. So I think it's interesting to think about what mock might be doing. But until I ride DC Rivals, or they're building a or no, that's an Intamin. Sorry, forget that. At Wallaby, Belgium, that's an Intamin ride. But until they start to do more of these bigger rides that are accessible for the folks like us, mock hasn't completely proven that they can build that top 10 ride yet. They build solid rides. They build reliable rides. They are fun. They're certainly some of the most comfortable and re-rideable rides. But they're not some of the most intense and most out of control, which is the type of ride that I like. And then lastly, I went with SNS Vekoma. For a combination of the reasons that I talked about with all these others, right? So I'm not going to rehash them, but they have limited quantity of big rides. They've got a lot of quantity in terms of free flies and some other small things here. They've got a couple of wood coasters scattered throughout that aren't very good. Actually, one or two of them are quite bad. The one at Clementon Park is actually pretty atrocious, if you ask me personally. I think a lot can be said about them the same way as mock. I think Vekoma is kind of in the position that mock was maybe in 7 or 8 years ago, where they're really intriguing over in Europe, and I'd love to see them do some of their newer stuff over here, because they're doing certainly some higher quality stuff than Vekoma has been known for a number of years with the boomerangs and the SLCs. We've seen little glimpses of that over here with rides like Freedom Flyer and Dragon Flyer. They're smoother, better quality rides. The question is whether or not that translates to some of their bigger rides. It seems like it does over there, but this panel here doesn't really know that yet. I mean, and maybe we won't, because they're going to be doing a lot of that under the SNS banner here. Steel Curtain, the most recent example, is a good ride, but I'll be quite honest with you, I liked Copperhead Strike a little bit better than Steel Curtain, if that tells you anything. And I already talked about Copperhead Strike in that context. I ranked them very close to one another, but I think Copperhead Strike's the better ride. So if that tells you anything, I mean, Steel Curtain's right in my top 50 area there. I don't know that I have a single SNS or Vekoma ride in my top 50. So that's why I went with them last. So there you go.
Yeah, I did love Steel Curtain, and I was not impressed with Copperhead Strike last year. But yeah.
Fair enough.
But we kind of did it the exact opposite for the same reasons.
No, yeah, exactly. I think there's been some similar lines of thinking here. So Dwayne, you can't hide anymore.
Can't hide. So since obviously we have hit on almost everything that really can be said in every angle that we've gone through, I want to take a look at it, maybe not so much from my angle, but maybe more from the general public / park angle. Okay. So piggybacking on something that Danny and Andy said, why is it that parks like Cedar Point, Kings Island, bigger parks, Carowinds, I could go on and on. I'm not just saying Cedar Fair parks, even to an extent, some Six Flags parks as well. Why is it that B&M, and I'll tell you that I did put B&M at the top for myself as well in this whole ranking system. Why is it that they put these, rides in the park? It's because it's what brings people through the gates. Okay. The general public wants, obviously, all right, to ride rides that, one, are fun, two, that give them an experience like none other that they've ever had before. And we're talking about a big difference between the extreme enthusiasts, like what we would be, compared to the general public. And we talk about this in all of our shows. We've done it for 7 years. but B&M gives you everything, and you guys have already talked about it. The fact that you can go on a Diamondback and ride it, 10, 15, 20 times a day and be okay. And you're not going to come off hurting. You're not going to have hurt legs. You're not going to have hurt, if you're riding it correctly and you don't staple yourself in, it is the smoothness of those rides, no matter what you're riding. I don't care if you're riding that, if you're riding Banshee, all right, with the invert, with the exception of the stand-ups, which we don't even talk about anymore because they don't exist. You don't have that issue. And you don't hear people coming off of those coasters saying, gosh, that was terrible. I'll never ride it again. You don't hear
Except
that.
for Raptor, but
Well, and again, you two can argue about that all day long.
Well, he got his Manta shot in. I get one Raptor.
It would be better if they had the other restraints, but that's never going to happen.
Well, it'd be better if it didn't headbang you to death.
So I think we look at it by saying yes, and B&M, of course, Fury 325, absolutely one of my favorite rides, just number 2. That's in and of itself. I'm just looking at it from the park's perspective. That's why we see so much of that. It's rides that people want to ride. I put RMC at number 5. Absolutely fantastic for every reason that you guys have said. And the fact that, yes, they dabble in both steel and wood coasters, but we tend to forget that they got their start by retracking coasters at the beginning. And so we really mentioned that yet, but that's kind of got them started, got the name out there, and then it just kind of blew up, right, to where they were building their own coasters. Then they started going the steel route. And when you see things like Steel Vengeance, I'm anxious to see how far these guys go, right? An American company, how far are they going to branch out? Are they going to go overseas and start another side of their company over there? Because it's obviously, the companies over there and the theme parks are going to start looking at that saying, man, I want something like Steel Vengeance. And they were able to take a coaster that was, downright awful in Mean Streak, keep the whole concept, the skeleton of that, and make it into something that's completely different that you would never even realize if you weren't aware of Cedar Point, that there was a coaster there before. So just their innovation has them going, because I think, Jeff said it best. He says it's what's going to happen in the future. Where are they going to take us? That's the company that we are going to be talking about 10, 15, 20 years down the road, when some of us are not going to be able to ride anymore because our bodies aren't going to be allow us to do it. But that's where we're headed. So, that's why I put them up there. And again, it's rides that people want to ride. Why did Cedar Point do that with Mean Streak? Mean Streak had low rideability. Let's bring in someone who can give us something great. And now look at the amount of people that are in the back of the park. And you've got, my opinion, the two best rides in that park, Steel Vengeance and Maverick, right beside each other. So, when you look at it there, everybody's now funneling back to that back of the park. And it's really helped kind of balance out that park, in my opinion, too. GCI, I put them at number 3. I absolutely love them. Mystic Timbers is still one of my favorite, just casual rides, as I like to call it. Fun in every way. A lot of wood coasters nowadays. The old ones, I just can't ride those anymore for multiple reasons. But at GCI, absolutely love every single one that I've ridden on. And obviously the general public likes them as well. When you think about it, look at the amount of people who ride Mystic Timbers. And I've liked a lot of them. Right. The one at Dollywood, I know Andy said he wasn't a big fan of it. I actually enjoyed it. That's about where I tore my shoulder off too.
Yeah, Andy doesn't like rides that are the slightest Andy doesn't like rides that have forces on them.
The only problem was I had my hands up and I literally tore my shoulder up. But other than that, I enjoyed the ride. Let's put it that way.
It's the best part, right?
So, but there are ones that I haven't liked. But I'm just saying in general, they're better than, and everyone's going to be surprised why I put Intimate at number 4. Because everyone knows Maverick's my favorite ride. It has been, even with the ride. Still Vengeance, but whatever. Yeah, it could be. But Maverick has always been. It's like Andy. Andy has Raptor there. Maverick is because it's what I enjoy. I could literally go and ride it and never get off of it. We did it for 31 laps or something, Andy. It was ridiculous. That night, we were like one of the last.
God blessed you that night.
But anyway, with Intimate rides, yes, you've got Millennium Force. Yes, you've got Maverick. And yes, the people want to ride those rides. But outside of those two, okay, in Ohio, and then you take for example, Thigh Crush, okay? Okay, how many people would be able to tell you in the general public stance anyway, rides other than those? They say, yeah, I want to go ride that. It's an Intamin. Okay, so that's looking at it from that standpoint. Yes, we could sit here and name Intamin coasters all day long, but the general public doesn't understand. They just see the track and they're like, yeah, that looks fun. So I think just, and for me, yes, I love Millennium Force. Yes, I love Maverick, obviously. But like Danny said, you have a few, and then where are the rest of them? They're not even your list. So I look at it, and yes, there are some quality rides. Cannot wait to see this Velociraptor ride because, I mean, obviously, just what it looks like already. But is Intamin going – because they went away. Why did they go away is the question. Why is it that they left after the 2000s and went to Europe? Were they getting more money? There had to be something, and that's for another show. Mock, I have only ridden Copperhead Strike, so I can't go into more of that, but I do not and dislike, or I should say dislike. I don't like most Vekoma S&S coasters. I haven't ridden a lot of those either, so that's kind of why they're below.
There's not many here to ride that are
well, and that's true too. But so that's one reason why they're at the bottom, just because I haven't ventured out. I have not ridden as many coasters as Danny and Andy have, so I can't. My perspective on that's a little bit different, so that's why they're down. But even then, the general public stance, they're not going to know the difference anyway. So I really just wanted to kind of put it in that stance because I could have sat here and said the same things that those guys did, but I wanted to pull it in to a little bit of a different perspective. So there you go. That's what I have.
Well, and it's interesting because if you look at RMC, so if we look at the total numbers here, RMC and B&M were placed at number 1 with the most points with 20 points. Intamin was number 2. GCI was number 3. Mac was number 4. And Vekoma was number 5. One of the interesting points that you said, Dwayne, was about bringing people through. And it seems to me like the RMCs have not been winners in terms of attendance. That I don't think people understand that. I don't think
people love them, but they don't turn the turnstiles
because it's a hard sell. You're selling, hey, we got this old ass wood coaster that everyone hated, but now you're gonna love it because we did this to it. And I don't think people buy it. I think once people come in, they're like, oh my God, that's amazing. Or a lot of people, especially some clubs out there, they don't like it because they find them to be too rough, too aggressive. Kind of like the Sky Rush theory. I know, I roll my eyes as well.
I think that's why Cedar Fair went the route of naming their RMC Iron Horses completely different from what the old rides are. I've been saying that for years. The Six Flags, they Colossus to Twisted Colossus, Cyclone to Wicked Cyclone, Rattler to Iron Rattler. Texas Giant to New Texas Giant, Georgia Cyclone to Twisted Cyclone. Even Busch Gardens is doing this here. Gwazi to Iron Gwazi. And obviously you can see that it's purple now. And obviously Iron Gwazi looks significantly different. But if you go to Six Flags New England as, a member of the general public, if you haven't been there in 5 years and you drive up and you see Wicked Cyclone sitting up on the hill there, you may not notice that that's any different than the ride that was there before. And yeah, it looks orange, but okay. And Twisted Colossus, it's still a big white wooden structure, and you may not notice.
And there you go. That's part of it. I'm telling you, I think a big part of it is visual representation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
People
they lack that big factor.
Yes, they want to see it in the skyline. They want to be able to see it from the outside. They want to see it when you're driving in. That is what brings people through. All right, and not to mention, the majority of the people, especially in the general public, want smooth rides. And people, unfortunately, today think of wooden rides as rough. Yeah. Even though we know that a hybrid coaster isn't, they still, and again, not knowing what they're talking about because they're general public, they don't
even a ride called Steel Vengeance, they think it's wood.
Right, exactly. And again, even if they rode it before, they're like, well, how can it be any different than Mean Streak? I rode Mean Streak. It was terrible, broke my back. How are you putting on a different track going to help it any? So they don't understand that, and until they ride it, that's not going to bring them in. They're still going to be the casual people that come on a weekend, come with their family. They're not going to buy the season pass. That's not what brought them here.
Well, that will wrap up the first half of our discussion here tonight. So it's hard to nail down sometimes what the best manufacturer is, but I think we did a good job of trying to show differences of opinions here. So we will take a break here. Hear a word from our sponsor, which is us too, and we will come back with our favorite segment of the rant. So we'll head on back here on the Screamin' Horseshoe Q. Starting 73928.9, the starship USS Coaster is currently orbiting the planet Montana Rusa. Starfleet has heard rumors of a new warlord named Lord Dandy, who plans now to take over this entire planet. Starfleet has ordered us to form a new task force called Club 98. Our plan is to infiltrate them and take them out from the inside. Will you answer the call and join Club 98?
And welcome back to the Screaming Horseshoe Q, and it is now time for the second part of the show. So grab your other half of the Oreo cookie, the part that you didn't lick off the other side. And we're going to head into What in the Heck Were They Thinking, our segment of the show where we like to rant about a specific topic, and Danny has a good one for us tonight. So Danny, what is it?
Yeah, this is something that's bothered me for quite a long time here, and that was an interesting intro there, Dwayne. That got interesting there for a second, but
And he loves
we
to
were
lick
talking
the
about. Jesus. So we were talking amongst ourselves about what we wanted to rant about tonight. We had some ideas. We've got lots of ideas for what we can rant about, but we were struggling to hit the right topic, and we thought we had one when we were talking about station management. And then I said, you know what? I'm a little bit of an advocate for, because Jeff he likes station management, right? And I said, well, I kind of got to disagree for one reason, because when you don't have, we're talking about the people who stand at the entrance of the station and they pulse you in to the station so that the station is not completely crowded and filled to the brim, right? But there's one big reason that I like the crowded stations, and it's because there's nobody to tell you where to sit. And I cannot stand when I go to Carowinds on a Tuesday afternoon in May and Fury 325 is a walk-on and the jackass at the top of the station says, go to row 5. No, I'm not going to row 5, sir. I would like to go up front. There's nobody standing in row 1. I am going to row 1, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. And I will say this. Most people, most employees are quite willing to let you wait for the front or the back or wherever if you ask nicely. But every once in a while, you come across a particular person that just cannot stand to let you pick what row you would like to ride in. And I'll give you an example of a very good experience. When we were at California's Great America a couple of years ago, when we had the fast lane, the folk who were working Gold Striker day, we rode at 21 throughout the day. And the folks who were at Gold Striker knew us by the time we got to the early afternoon. And they knew we always wanted to sit in the back. So whenever they saw us coming up the stairs, they just didn't assign anyone to the back so we could just hop right on the next cycle around. That's good right there. I'm okay with that. I don't mind the station management and the pulsing if you're going to let folks who want to wait in front of
where you want. If you get to sit where you want, could get care less.
but you know, it makes me pull my hair out, and it's really long right now, so I can pull it out quite a ways. But the folks who absolutely will not let you sit where you want, it bugs me. Can I tell my Dueling Dragons story?
Sure, I got one too to tell. So
okay, so this is the Dueling Dragons story. Last weekend of Dueling Dragons, Adam the Beard Man and myself, we dedicated maybe the last 3 or 4 hours of the day from like 6:30, 7 o'clock until 10 p.m. when they closed. And we were just alternating the dragons. And we both like fire a little better, so we wanted to end on fire. So we're just going back and forth. Fire nice, fire nice, fire nice. Nobody in the line. They're sending half-empty trains. And there's barely even a wait for the front row, mind you. So Dueling Dragons doesn't often have a line. I'm not calling it Dragon Challenge. So we're going back and forth, and we like sitting in the back row. So, it's nighttime. It wasn't our very last ride, but, it's maybe about 9 o'clock. We're getting into the last hour here. And the lady, for whatever reason, told us to go to row 6. Rows 1, 2, and 3 are full. There's a group of 2 in row 8. And then there's nobody else in the station. So we're like, what? She put us in row 6. We didn't understand. And there's nobody behind us. So you know what? We went to row 8, but we both wanted end seats, right? So we just waited a cycle. There was nobody else coming. We waited a cycle. And she literally put the little stick across the bar so nobody else could walk in, said, no, you have to get on right now. Took us through the employee break room, out the back employee entrance onto the exit platform, walked us through the pass-through area of the station, and put us on the ride in between the 2 people who were already in the back row. So she let us sit in the back row, not the row she assigned us to. But then we got dispatched. There's still nobody waiting in line for the back row.
Danny, that defeats the purpose of what you're trying to do.
It defeated the purpose of what we were trying to do. That's the backstory to that catchphrase there. If anybody's wondering,
I have my own similar story. And that is on one Snake River Falls at Cedar Point. Now,
yes.
Now, so let's set the scene for us here. Snake River Falls. There's a few people in front of us in the queue. There's a few people behind us in the queue. But I think people were like coming in, so it wasn't like a great number of people. It was a hot day, so like the boats are like filling up most of the time. It'd be like a half full boat, 75% filled, that kind of stuff. So I come in, and the lady is adamant that I sit in row 2. I don't want to sit in row 2. You know why I don't want to sit in row 2? What happens when you sit in row 2 on a damn shoot the chutes ride? You get soaking wet. Your shoes are wet. Your shirt is wet. You're soaking wet for the rest of the damn day. I want to sit in row 5 or 6 where you get a nice little sprinkle.
Especially when it's not a full boat. when it's heavy.
So like I literally start walking to a different row because usually if someone assigns me a row, I just walk wherever I want because it's an open station. I don't need someone to tell me, oh, row 3 is open when the entire station is open. I understand row 3 is open, but if I wanted to sit in the shittiest row, I would have walked to row 3 and not to row 5 or 6.
It's like when you get to the golf course for your tee time and you see the parking lot of golf carts and they say, oh, pick any cart you like, and you pick one in the middle.
Yeah.
So you have to move like 8 of them around.
So the write-op like loses her mind that I'm insinuating. I'm like, I don't want to sit in row 2. She's like, you have to sit in row 2. So I'm livid, and of course I get off the ride. I'm soaking wet.
And you said to her, no, stop. That's not the rule.
No, I did say that. That's why I said I Goliath. So then like my family wants to eat lunch, and I'm like thinking to myself, wait a minute, I'm soaking wet. Who the hell eats lunch when they're soaking wet? I'm like, so I'm pissed off. I'm pissed off now that I got to go eat lunch soaking wet. I refuse to eat lunch because I said barbarians only eat lunch when they're soaking wet, not civilized human beings. So it's a whole shit show. And it's still to this day that anytime there's a sprinkling, that comes up in conversation amongst my family. That if we're outside and there's a sprinkling, they will say, oh, well, we know we can't have lunch now or we can't eat right now.
It's better to be pissed off than pissed on.
True.
Because that's happened before.
So I don't understand it. Like I get if there was no one else in line and the boat was going to be completely empty, it might be a balancing issue like on Shoot the Rapids. But Shoot the Chutes rides don't really have a whole lot of balancing issues. they run them however most of the time. So it was just
Most of the time they're empty.
yeah. It was just someone with a power trip. Oh, well, I'm going to tell you what road you're going to sit in. Get the hell out of here. Any other good stories about seating choice? No.
I've got lots of bad experiences with it, but certainly nothing.
I mean, I've never had a like. I mean, it happens all the time. I mean, Diamondback was the worst for forever.
Oh.
I mean, it was the worst. I mean, it didn't matter. I mean, if you went up there, you know, they told you, you know, you are going to go to row 3, you know, because, and again, this was always when Diamondback was, you know, 2-hour wait. So I get that. Whatever. You want to get the most people in there and you're whatever. I understand that. But what I didn't understand really was Maverick for times when it wasn't packed. So we're talking not walk on, but we're talking less than 10 minutes. And you get up there and you've been waiting in line for a while and you get up there and you're like, I'm going to wait. I want to be in the back of, you know, give me one of the back of the trains. And I just remember the guy saying, no, we're putting you in places because we got to get through all these people. And I'm like, that's not how this is supposed to work. This is consumer-based theme park.
I completely understand you wanting to fill up the train. I get wanting to fill up the train. I get wanting to be able to put groups together. But if you're skilled as a grouper, you should be able to do that and still allow people to sit where they want. Because most people don't give a shit where they sit.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Because the majority of and again, this goes back to the argument. Here we are. We're talking about people who know what they're talking about, right? People who want to ride, you know, B&Ms in the back, you know, for a reason. You know, you get pulled. You want to. We understand that. The general public, they don't know the difference between sitting in row 4 and row 8. So to them, I mean, yeah, everybody's like, I want to sit in the front. That's as far as that's as far as
they don't care.
Right. And like Top Thrill Dragster, right? They allow you to go in, and if you want to sit there and wait an extra 30 minutes for that front row, they don't care. They let you do it. They let you sit down in there. But then the rest of it, they do put you in when you're talking about rides like Top Thrill. And again, it's because most people don't care when they're at the park. They've sat in the line for an hour and a half. They just want to get on the darn thing. Yeah. So, and again, I think it's that balance.
And I did that as a ride out, not so much when I was at Talon. I mean, Talon, I made sure that there was, you know, no more than 2 trains worth of people. That's about how much the aisleways at Talon could hold. Generally like 6 to 8 people. The front row could hold a little bit more than that. The back could hold a little bit more than that. So I never told people where to go at Talon. At Possessed, because it was a very big station, we were told to limit the number of people so that the station was not overly crowded in case there ever was an issue where they needed to evacuate the station because it is quite large. So we always did like 1 or 2 trains, and I would let people in and let them sort of fill in. And it's amazing how even really dumb people will gravitate towards the empty rows. I guarantee you when they stand in line for Maverick for 2 hours, if there's 6 people in row 1, 6 people in row 2, nobody in row 3, 10 people in row 4, 10 people in row 5, and 20 people for the back, who is going to pass up row 3 that's empty? 95% of people are going to go to that empty row. So usually I would pulse, and once I had, you know, 2 trains worth of people in almost every row, I would stop and I would ask, do you care where you sit? And if they said no, I would say, okay, can you go to this row? And if they said, yeah, I want to sit for the front, if there was enough room up by the front, I would let them go wait, or I'd just ask them to step to the side until another train went through, and then I'd let them through. It's really that simple, folks.
Like nature, like they always say, nature abhors a vacuum. So like people are going to gravitate to the open spots. They're just going to naturally do that. And most of the time, even if the station is empty and there's no line, most of the rides, it doesn't matter where you sit. Like there's very few rides that you actually need to balance. Shoot the Rapids is one. Windseeker is one. Where balancing actually helps the ride operate. But most coasters, it doesn't matter. Sit wherever. That's why I don't understand why people are so intent on sending people to different seats. Like I get wanting to do certain things, but a lot of times it makes life more difficult, I think.
Well, and if you really care where you sit on one of those flat rides that needs to be balanced, like a Ferris wheel or, a top spin or something like that, then, or a wind seeker, then you've got a real problem if you have a seat preference there because they're all the same.
Yeah, you're in a circle, buddy. But it's just, I just don't understand it. And in some parks, it seems to me that the old Paramount parks have more control issues than do maybe some of the original Cedar Fair parks. I've never, as much as I tell the story about Snake River Falls, there's not many rides there that people care about where you sit on. They just send you into the station, and if there's open spots, like they said, like you did, they will send people to the open spots to make sure that.
In Maverick and Millennium, where they're very
Millennium
particular about pulsing, they don't tell you where to sit. They just stop you.
Millennium Year 1 actually assigned seats. Year 1. They did so because I remember, and they would not even let you stay in line for row 1 because on my first ride on Millennium Force, I hit row 1 and didn't have to wait an extra train because
I feel like a lot of rides do that year 1, and I think that's fine.
Yeah, year 1 because the line's going to be long. You don't want to deal with the bullshit and whatever. But is Wicked Cyclone still force?
No, that was just the first year.
Wicked Cyclone. They pulse you now. But
they'll let like two to three trains worth of people into that narrow station now.
Yeah, and again, that's because you only have the one way out of that station. If anything ever happened in the station where they need to evacuate, you need to go back out the way you came, or you need to walk across the train. So it's largely in situations like that. My stance as a former operator has always been, if you're not going to have if you're not going to have a grouper that's doing a good job of grouping and keeping the guests happy, just let them flood the station and put that person on the platform to dispatch the trains faster.
Yeah.
And get an extra person checking seatbelts and harnesses.
I actually tell you, if there's no grouper, I will sometimes take it upon myself to practice station management. And I will stand at that turnstile and
Andy, I do ride management at certain parks like that. I take it a step further. So when I go to Six Flags Magic Mountain and they first open those gates and we're jogging towards X2, my dad did this in 2012, and I've done it every visit to Magic Mountain ever since. Oh, I can't believe X2 is closed all day. And if you say that enough times on your way up the mountain, you can get a couple of rides on X2 without getting off. Let me tell you, because I've done it.
No, but I will most definitely stand at the station and not let people in. And not like excessive.
Do it all the time.
Like 2 trains. Like, I'm going to clear out the station just to get it cleared out. I don't want people packing themselves in.
Where were we? You did that somewhere where we were, and I couldn't stop laughing because the people were so irritated behind us.
Like, hey, it's a line. We're all going to the same place, buddy. And
I'll be the guy.
What?
Orion first rider auction going. I can't believe Orion's
Yeah, Danny, you're done. He's done for the evening.
Wait, I'm back. I'm back. I'm going to be the guy at Orion first rider auction night going, I can't believe Orion's closed all night.
You would be that guy. Jeff, I'm shocked. Well, you don't stand in line, so this doesn't.
No, I don't. But listening to you guys talk, the thing that bothers me about those busy stations, it's when the grouper is not right at the station. It's when they're like somewhere else pulsing from like behind line. That's when the
Six Flags. Let me pulse from 50 yards away.
Yeah, like Superman and King Dakar, El Toro. Those.
Well, Millennium Force does that.
Sometimes
Millennium Force does it before you get to the ramp.
Then you get like a group of 20 kids that are trying to ride group the entire train. And
King Dakar, the entire queue is in the weeds, and then the pulsar is right there, and then you have to go on like a 4-mile hike until you get to the station.
Well, first you gotta get frisked by the pulsar now.
Yeah, that's right. Now you do.
If there is a busy station in King Dakar, the secret is shoot for row 2. It's empty.
Yeah.
Because there's a big crowd, nobody sees that it's empty.
And the thing that I hate the most is when you have a grouper and they're grouping like Nazis and they still manage to have open seats on the train. You still can't do your job right. You want to be
the employee is actually dumber than the dumb people in the park.
Like we would be better off having the people choose themselves.
It would have eventually filled that seat because let me tell you, and I'll tell you, I've seen this plenty of times, both as a guest and an operator. They see 2 seats that have the yellow tape on them that says, do not use this seat, and they still try to sit in it because they see it's empty.
Oh,
probably a kid with a basketball.
Oh, well, basketball. So, I think that's all we got here tonight for the Screamin' Horseshoe Q. A fun time was had by all again. So as always, I am Andrew Barchak from Chicago, Illinois.
Danny Miller, Binghamton, New York.
Jeff Goodman from Long Island, New York.
Dwayne Sponseller from Parkersburg, West Virginia. And may the queue lines be ever in your favor. Please, Parks, just open, will you?
Right.
Don't have bloopers.